the battle that decided the fate of Earth and forever changed the balance of power in the galaxy, began with what appeared to be humanity's greatest disadvantage: their complete lack of faster-than-light travel. Captain Zex Thor's fleet had retreated to what they considered a safe distance, just beyond Earth's moon. 3 of his 12 ships had sustained critical damage from the humans' kinetic weaponry, and his tactical officers were struggling to adapt their strategies to an enemy that seemed to break every rule of primitive warfare. "Status report," Zex Thor demanded as damage control teams worked frantically throughout his flagship. "We've lost approximately 30% of our combat effectiveness," reported Commander Throck, his usual confidence replaced by grim concern. "The humans' weapons are specifically designed to penetrate our defensive systems." "How is that possible? They've had less than a week to study our technology." Science Officer Quindal coiled nervously around her station. "Captain, I believe we've fundamentally misunderstood human capabilities. Their industrial and scientific infrastructure appears to operate on principles of rapid adaptation rather than steady advancement." Before Zex Thor could respond, Communications Officer Yilneth interrupted with urgency in her translucent features. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony High Council." The main display shimmered, and the imposing figure of Supreme Commander Velthara appeared. As one of the most feared military leaders in galactic history, her very presence on the communication channel indicated the seriousness of the situation. "Captain Zex Thor," her voice carried the authority of absolute command, "your reports have reached the High Council. A single primitive world has managed to damage 3 hegemony warships?" "Supreme Commander, these humans are not like the other species we've encountered. Their adaptation rate is unprecedented, and their willingness to sacrifice—" "Enough," Velthara cut him off. "You will complete this conquest within the next standard day, or I will personally oversee your replacement. The hegemony's reputation cannot afford to have a primitive species successfully resist our forces." The transmission ended, leaving Zex Thor to face a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond his control. But before he could formulate a new strategy, Lieutenant Vashika's voice cut through the bridge's tension. "Captain, we have a problem. A very large problem." "Define large, Lieutenant." "I'm reading massive spatial distortions throughout this system. It's as if something is manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time itself." The tactical display filled with energy readings that defied explanation. Gravitational anomalies were appearing at seemingly random locations throughout the Sol system, each one growing in intensity and scope. "That's impossible," Quindal hissed. "Space-time manipulation requires technology levels far beyond anything these humans possess." But the evidence was undeniable. Across the system, the humans were doing something that challenged the very foundations of galactic physics. What the aliens didn't know was that humanity's response to the threat had gone far beyond conventional warfare. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in facilities that had been theoretical just days before, human scientists were implementing the most desperate gambit in their species' history. Every particle accelerator on the planet had been networked together into a single massive system. Every fusion reactor was contributing power to a project that existed at the very edge of human understanding. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, one of Earth's leading theoretical physicists and sister to General Sarah Chen, stood before a control panel that represented the collective scientific knowledge of her entire species. Around her, hundreds of the world's brightest minds worked in unprecedented collaboration. "Final systems check," she announced to the global network of facilities. "Beijing, report status." "Particle acceleration systems at maximum capacity," came the response from China's most advanced physics laboratory. "CERN, status report." "Quantum field generators operating within acceptable parameters," replied the facility that had spent decades probing the fundamental nature of reality. "Fermilab, confirm readiness." "All systems nominal." Standing by for activation sequence. Dr. Chen took a deep breath. What they were attempting had never been tested beyond computer simulations. The mathematics suggested it was possible, but the margin for error was essentially zero. If they failed, Earth would be defenseless. If they succeeded, they would demonstrate capabilities that even the galactic hegemony had only theoretical knowledge of. All stations. This is Dr. Chen. We are implementing Protocol Omega. All facilities. Begin synchronized activation in 10 seconds. Across Earth, in laboratories buried deep beneath mountains and cities, the most advanced scientific equipment ever created by human hands began to operate in perfect harmony. The goal was audacious beyond description: to artificially generate the conditions necessary for faster-than-light manipulation of local space-time. Back on the Hegemony flagship, the effects became apparent within minutes. "Sir," Zenkar called out with alarm, "the spatial distortions are intensifying. I'm reading gravitational flux that shouldn't be possible to generate artificially." "What are they doing down there?" Zexthor demanded. His answer came in the form of a transmission that appeared simultaneously on every screen throughout the alien fleet. Dr. Chen stood in her underground facility, but behind her, the view showed something that made veteran alien warriors step back in shock. A swirling vortex of distorted space-time stretched across the laboratory's main chamber. Energy readings from the display suggested power outputs that rivaled small stars, all focused on manipulating the fundamental fabric of reality itself. "Greetings, Captain Zexthor," Dr. Chen said calmly. "I'm Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Director of the Human Unified Physics Project. I thought you should know what you're really facing." Behind her, the impossible continued to unfold. The space-time distortion was growing, expanding, taking on characteristics that suggested controlled manipulation of forces the aliens had only read about in theoretical journals. "You've been operating under several false assumptions about human capabilities," Dr. Chen continued. "You assumed that because we haven't developed faster-than-light travel, we don't understand the underlying physics. You were wrong." The view shifted to show other facilities around the world. Each one contained similar space-time manipulation equipment, and all of them were operating in perfect synchronization. The combined effect was creating gravitational fields that were reshaping the local characteristics of the Sol system itself. You assumed that because we haven't built massive space fleets, we lack the industrial capacity for large-scale projects. Also wrong. Images flashed across the screen showing the unprecedented construction projects that had been taking place across Earth. Not just weapons and defensive systems, but infrastructure for projects that operated on stellar scales. Orbital construction platforms that had been assembled in days rather than years. Manufacturing facilities that could produce exotic materials in quantities that defied economic logic. But most importantly, Dr. Chen said, you assume that because we've never faced an alien invasion, we haven't prepared for it. That assumption is about to cost you everything. The space-time distortions throughout the system suddenly stabilized into a pattern that made even Zexthor's advanced sensors struggle to process the readings. The humans had done something that should have required centuries of technological development. They had created artificial faster-than-light communication and, more importantly, faster-than-light weapon delivery systems. What you're witnessing, Dr. Chen explained, is the implementation of theoretical physics that we've been developing for over 50 years. We called it pure research because we hoped we'd never need to weaponize it. But you've given us excellent motivation to accelerate our timeline. On the tactical display, new contacts began appearing throughout the system. Not ships, something else entirely. Energy signatures that suggested the humans had found a way to project their weapons across impossible distances instantaneously. "Sir," Vashka reported with growing panic, "I'm reading weapons locks from 17 different locations, but the targeting systems are coming from coordinates that shouldn't be able to maintain line of sight with our position." Explain that statement, Lieutenant. The targeting beams are originating from the far side of their planet, from locations that are physically blocked by the planet's mass. Somehow, they're projecting weapons through space-time itself. Dr. Chen's transmission continued, and now her calm demeanor carried undertones that reminded Zexthor of the most dangerous predators he'd ever encountered. You wanted to know what humans do when faced with extinction? We transcend our limitations. We break the rules that constrain us. We become what we need to become to survive. The first shot came from a weapon that existed simultaneously in 17 different locations across the Sol system. It struck the Hegemony flagship with force that penetrated every defensive system the aliens possessed, not because it was overwhelmingly powerful, but because it operated on principles that made conventional defenses irrelevant. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Zexthor commanded. But his tactical officer was already shaking his head. Sir, evasive maneuvers are ineffective. Their weapons are tracking us through space-time itself. They're targeting our location in 4 dimensions rather than 3. What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a demonstration of what happened when a species that had mastered theoretical physics decided to apply their knowledge to warfare. The human weapons didn't travel to their targets. They simply appeared at the target location, having bypassed the intervening space entirely. Damage report, Zexthor called out as his ship shuddered under impacts that his sensors couldn't fully track. Massive damage across all decks. They're targeting our power systems with precision that suggests complete knowledge of our ship design. Commander Throck, his warrior's pride finally broken, spoke the words that no Hegemony officer had ever been forced to utter. Sir, I recommend immediate retreat. We cannot fight weapons that operate outside normal space-time. But Dr. Chen's transmission wasn't finished. Captain Zexthor, you and your fleet are free to leave our system. But first, I want you to understand something about the species you attempted to conquer. The view changed one final time, showing a perspective from space that encompassed the entire Earth. But now the planet appeared different. Energy fields surrounded it like a protective shell, and the space around it shimmered with controlled distortions that suggested defensive capabilities beyond anything the aliens had imagined. We didn't build these weapons to conquer other worlds, Dr. Chen explained. We built them to protect our own. But now that we know there are hostile species in the galaxy, we're going to ensure this never happens to any other world. The implications hit Zexthor like a physical blow. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were demonstrating capabilities that could challenge the entire galactic hegemony. Your 17 conquered worlds, Dr. Chen continued. We've calculated their positions based on your ship's navigation systems. We're prepared to offer them the same protection we've given Earth. All they have to do is ask. The transmission ended, leaving the alien bridge in stunned silence. In less than a week, humanity had gone from appearing to be a primitive species ripe for conquest to demonstrating technological capabilities that threatened the very foundation of galactic power. Sir, Communications Officer Yilneth reported quietly, we're receiving surrender requests from our occupation forces on 4 different worlds. What? The humans transmitted their demonstration to our occupied territories. The subject populations are demanding protection under what they're calling the human doctrine. Zexthor realized that his expedition had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had awakened a species that was more dangerous as an enemy than valuable as a conquest. Worse, they had given humanity a reason to look beyond their own solar system. All ships, he commanded with defeat heavy in his voice, prepare for immediate departure from this system. As his battered fleet began its retreat, Zexthor couldn't help but wonder if they had just witnessed the end of the galactic hegemony's era of unopposed expansion. Behind them, Earth continued its impossible work, turning theoretical physics into practical reality and ensuring that no species would ever face alien conquest alone again. The humans had been right about one thing. They didn't surrender. They adapted. They overcame. And now, they were preparing to make sure that freedom was available to every intelligent species in the galaxy. The age of human expansion was about to begin, built not on conquest, but on liberation. And it had all started because one alien captain had made the mistake of thinking that humanity looked weak. The first real battle began at exactly 73 hours after the initial alien demonstration. Captain Zexthor had grown increasingly uncomfortable with the humans' preparations. But orders from the Hegemony High Council were clear. Complete the subjugation quickly and move on to the next target system. All ships, commence planetary bombardment, Zexthor commanded. Target their military installations and major population centers. Full power this time. The 12 Hegemony warships unleashed their fury upon Earth. Plasma beams that could melt through starship hulls lanced down toward military bases, government buildings, and industrial centers. The night sky lit up like a dozen suns as the alien weapons struck their targets. But something was wrong. "Sir," Tactical Officer Zenkar reported with confusion, "impact readings are inconsistent. Several targets show minimal damage despite direct hits." "Impossible," Commander Throck growled. "Our plasma cannons can destroy mountain ranges." On the main display, the aftermath of their bombardment became visible. Where they expected to see crater-filled devastation, many targets showed surprisingly intact structures. Smoke and debris obscured some areas, but the overall destruction was far less than anticipated. "Enhanced shielding?" suggested Science Officer Quindal. "But their technology level shouldn't allow for such defensive capabilities." Lieutenant Vashka's tentacles danced frantically across her sensors. "Captain, I'm reading massive subterranean installations beneath many of the target sites. It appears the humans have been building underground facilities far more extensive than our initial scans detected." The truth was even more unsettling than they realized. In the 73 hours since the alien arrival, humanity had achieved something that should have been impossible. Every major nation had opened their emergency bunker systems, not just for government officials, but for entire populations. The intricate networks of tunnels and reinforced chambers that had been built during humanity's Cold War period were being expanded and improved at breakneck speed. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from Earth," Communications Officer Yil Neth reported. This time, the human who appeared on screen was different. It was a middle-aged woman in military uniform, standing in what appeared to be a command center carved from solid rock deep underground. Behind her, dozens of humans worked at computer stations, while others coordinated with surface teams through communication arrays. "I'm General Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," she announced. "Yes, you heard correctly. In the past 3 days, every nation on Earth has united under a single military command, something that should have been impossible, but you've given us excellent motivation." She gestured to someone off-screen, and the view shifted to show a massive underground facility stretching as far as the camera could see. Thousands of humans worked in organized groups, some operating manufacturing equipment, others maintaining communication systems, still others preparing weapons and equipment. "You targeted our surface installations," General Chen continued. "That was predictable. Any species that's conquered 17 worlds probably follows similar tactical patterns. But you made a fundamental error in understanding human psychology." The view changed again, this time showing surface installations that had appeared devastated from orbit. But from ground level, it became clear that the destruction was largely superficial. Underground, the real facilities remained completely intact. "We've been preparing for global catastrophe for over a century," Chen explained. "Nuclear war, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, We've designed our critical infrastructure to survive the worst imaginable scenarios. Your plasma bombardment was impressive, but it wasn't even close to our worst-case planning." Zexthor felt his mandibles click involuntarily. "Respond to their transmission. Inform them that this was merely a warning. Our next attack will reduce their planet to molten rock." But General Chen wasn't finished. "You want to know what you're really facing? Let me show you something interesting about human industrial capacity." The transmission cut to images from across Earth's surface. Where the aliens expected to see panic and devastation, they witnessed something entirely different. Massive construction projects were underway at every location. Humans were building structures at a speed that defied explanation, not just repairing damage, but actively improving their defensive positions. "In the past 72 hours, Chen continued, we've converted every major industrial facility on Earth to wartime production. Every civilian manufacturing plant is now producing military equipment. Every research laboratory is now focused on defensive technologies. Every educational institution has become a training center." The images showed the impossible becoming reality. Auto manufacturing plants were producing armored vehicles. Electronics factories were creating communication equipment. Even food processing facilities had been converted to produce military rations and medical supplies. "But that's not the impressive part," Chen said, with something that might have been a smile. "The impressive part is what we've learned about you." Zexthor straightened in his command chair. "What could these primitives possibly have learned?" "Your weapons are energy-based," Chen continued. "Plasma, primarily, with some particle beam technology. Your ships rely heavily on energy shielding rather than physical armor. Your tactical approach follows predictable patterns based on technological superiority." She gestured again, and the view shifted to show something that made the entire alien bridge crew fall silent. Emerging from hidden facilities across Earth's surface were structures that shouldn't have been possible to build in such a short time. Massive electromagnetic field generators, kinetic launch systems, and most disturbing of all, what appeared to be functional energy weapons based on principles the aliens recognized. "You've been watching us for weeks," Chen explained, "scanning our technology, cataloging our capabilities, recording our communications. But we've been watching you too. Every energy signature from your ships, every scanning beam you've directed at our planet, every transmission you've made, we've been analyzing it all." Commander Throck stepped forward. "Impossible. They lack the technological foundation to understand our systems." "Sir," Science Officer Quindal whispered urgently, "I'm detecting high-energy signatures from multiple locations on the surface. They appear to be energy weapons of unknown configuration." "That's correct," General Chen said, as if she could hear the alien conversation. "We've reverse-engineered your scanning technology. Primitive by your standards, perhaps, but functional enough for our purposes." What followed was a demonstration that shattered every assumption the galactic hegemony had made about human capabilities. From hidden positions across Earth's surface, energy beams lanced upward toward the alien fleet. They weren't as powerful as the aliens' own weapons, but they were functional, and more importantly, they were numerous. "Evasive maneuvers!" Zexthor commanded as his ship's shields flared under multiple impacts. "All ships, return fire!" But the humans had learned more than just weapons technology. As the alien ships maneuvered to avoid the surface-based fire, they found themselves facing a three-dimensional battlefield they hadn't anticipated. The hundreds of crude human spacecraft that had launched over the past days weren't suicide vessels. They were carrying kinetic weapons systems that exploited the one weakness in alien defensive technology that humans had identified: physical projectiles. "Sir, our shields are ineffective against their kinetic weapons," Zenkar reported with growing alarm. "They're using simple tungsten projectiles accelerated to extreme velocities." It was elegant in its simplicity. The alien energy shields were designed to deflect plasma and particle beams, but they offered minimal protection against solid objects traveling at significant fractions of light speed. The humans had taken their most primitive weapon concept, throwing rocks, and elevated it to devastating effectiveness. "Damage report," Zexthor demanded as his ship shuddered under another kinetic impact. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, reported the damage control officer. "Shield generators are overloading from the frequency of impacts." The tactical display showed a situation that defied everything Zexthor thought he knew about primitive species. The human vessels weren't engaging in traditional combat. They were swarming, using their numbers and expendability to overwhelm the more advanced alien ships. Every time an alien vessel focused fire on one human craft, 3 others would attack from different vectors. "Sir," Vashka called out with increasing urgency, "I'm reading massive energy buildups from 17 locations on the planet's surface." "What kind of energy buildups?" "Unknown configuration, but the power levels are—" She paused, checking her readings again. "They're approaching the output of our main weapons systems." The answer came in the form of another transmission from General Chen. This time, she was standing in a facility that dwarfed anything they had seen before. Massive machinery hummed in the background, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with contained energy. "You're probably wondering how a primitive species could develop such capabilities so quickly," Chen said. "The answer is simple. We didn't develop them. We had them all along." Behind her, the camera panned across installations that made the alien bridge crew gasp in recognition. Particle accelerators that stretched for kilometers underground. Fusion reactors that rivaled the power output of small stars. Electromagnetic field generators that could have powered entire alien fleets. "You made one critical error in your assessment," Chen continued. "You assumed that because we hadn't weaponized our technology, we didn't have the technology to weaponize. Every particle physics laboratory on our planet is now a weapons research facility. Every fusion reactor is now a power source for defensive systems. Every electromagnetic experiment has been converted to military applications." Zexthor realized with growing horror that they weren't facing a primitive species at all. They were facing a species that had chosen not to militarize their most advanced technology until now. "Our deepest research facilities have been working on projects you can't imagine," Chen said. "Antimatter containment, artificial gravity generation, quantum field manipulation. We called it pure research because we hoped we'd never need to weaponize it." The transmission cut to images that made even the veteran alien warriors step back from their stations. Weapons that bent the laws of physics. Defensive systems that operated on principles the galactic hegemony had theoretical knowledge of, but had never successfully implemented. Most terrifying of all, manufacturing capabilities that could produce these weapons at industrial scales. "You want to know the real difference between humans and the other species you've conquered?" Chen asked. "The others probably begged for mercy. They probably tried to negotiate. They probably hoped you'd be reasonable." Her expression hardened in a way that reminded Zexthor uncomfortably of the predators from his own homeworld. "We don't do any of those things. When humanity faces extinction, we become what we need to become to survive. And right now, we need to become your worst nightmare." The transmission ended just as the 17 energy signatures across Earth's surface reached critical levels. What happened next would forever change the galactic hegemony's understanding of what it meant to underestimate an enemy. "All ships, emergency retreat," Zexthor commanded. "Pull back to minimum safe distance." But as his fleet began to withdraw, he realized that minimum safe distance might be a lot farther than they had calculated. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were evolving their capabilities in real time, adapting to every alien tactic, and demonstrating a level of strategic coordination that suggested this was far from humanity's maximum effort. Looking at the tactical display, Zexthor began to suspect that his fleet hadn't found an easy conquest. They had awakened something that the galaxy had never seen before, a species that became more dangerous the more desperate their situation became. The real war was just beginning. Captain Zexthor adjusted his crystalline exoskeleton as he reviewed the intelligence reports floating before him in holographic displays. The bridge of the hegemony flagship Dominion's Edge hummed with the low vibrations of a dozen different alien species working in perfect coordination. As a member of the Kethari, one of the founding races of the galactic hegemony, Zexthor had overseen the subjugation of 17 primitive worlds. This 18th conquest should be no different. "Sir, we've completed our analysis of the third planet in the Sol system," reported Lieutenant Vashka, her tentacled appendages dancing across the sensor controls. "The inhabitants call themselves humans, and their world Earth." Zexthor's mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. "Show me what we're dealing with, Lieutenant." The main display shifted to show Earth in all its blue and green glory. Zexthor had seen hundreds of worlds, but he had to admit this: one possessed a certain primitive beauty. Cities dotted the continents like scattered gems connected by primitive transportation networks. "Population approximately 8 billion, Vashika continued. "Technology level, disappointing. They've barely achieved interplanetary travel within their own system. No faster-than-light capability detected. Their most advanced weapons appear to be fusion-based explosives and crude kinetic projectiles." "Military assessment?" Zexthor asked, though he suspected the answer would be equally underwhelming. Commander Throck, a hulking member of the warrior Gorath species, stepped forward. His massive frame cast shadows across the bridge as he spoke in his deep, gravelly voice. "Fragmented military forces across multiple nation-states. No unified planetary defense. Their largest armies number only in the millions. Average lifespan of 70 to 80 standard cycles." He paused, his tusks gleaming. "They appear to be remarkably fragile, Captain. Our preliminary biological scans suggest they can be killed by simple environmental exposure." The bridge erupted in what passed for laughter among the various alien species present. Zexthor's own species produced a sound like grinding crystal, while the Gorath made deep rumbling noises. Even the usually stoic Veltari exchanged knowing glances with their large, dark eyes. "Fragile and primitive," mused Science Officer Quindal, her serpentine form coiled around her station. "Their atmospheric requirements are quite specific: 21% oxygen, specific pressure ranges, narrow temperature tolerances. Remove any of these factors, and they simply cease to function." "What about their cultural development?" Zexthor inquired, though he was beginning to suspect this would be the easiest conquest in hegemony history. "Remarkably violent among themselves," reported cultural analyst Morden, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence as he accessed the data. "They've been in almost constant warfare for their entire recorded history. However, this appears to be due to their primitive nature rather than any actual martial prowess. Their conflicts are small-scale affairs involving crude weapons and basic tactics." Zexthor nodded slowly. The pattern was always the same with primitive worlds. Internal conflict, limited technology, fragile biology. "Any notable achievements we should be aware of?" "They've produced some interesting art and music," Morden admitted grudgingly. "Their literature shows imagination, though it's crude by galactic standards. They seem particularly fond of stories about overcoming impossible odds, though that's likely compensating for their natural limitations." "Fascinating," Zexthor said dryly. "Anything else of relevance?" "One curious observation," Vashka interjected, her sensor readings flickering. "Despite their primitive technology, they've managed to survive several potential extinction events on their world. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts that would have wiped out most species." "Luck," Commander Throck grunted dismissively. Even the most fragile species can survive through chance. Zexthor reviewed the data one final time. 8 billion primitive beings on a single world, armed with crude weapons and possessing no space-based defenses. Their own fleet consisted of 12 advanced warships, each capable of devastating entire continents. The mathematics were overwhelmingly in their favor. "Very well," he announced to the bridge crew. "We'll follow standard protocol. A demonstration of force should be sufficient to ensure immediate surrender. Target their largest population centers with warning shots. Once they understand our technological superiority, we'll demand their unconditional submission." "Sir," Communications Officer Yilneth spoke up, her translucent form shimmering, "should we attempt to contact their leadership first? Standard diplomatic protocol suggests—" "Unnecessary." Zexthor cut her off. "Look at them, Officer Yilneth. They're barely more advanced than the primitive tribes we encountered on Kreshmar 7th. A show of strength will save time for everyone involved." The bridge crew began preparing for what they all expected to be a routine subjugation. Weapon systems came online with soft chimes. Targeting computers calculated optimal positions for their demonstration strikes, and communication arrays prepared to broadcast surrender demands in the various human languages their computers had decoded. "Captain," reported Tactical Officer Zenkar, "all ships report ready. Shall we begin the demonstration?" "Proceed," Zexthor commanded, settling back in his command throne. "Target their capital cities with low-yield plasma bursts. Nothing that will cause significant damage, just enough to get their attention." The 12 ships of the Hegemony fleet moved into position above Earth's major population centers. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Moscow all came under the shadow of alien warships that dwarfed the tallest skyscrapers below. "Firing," reported Zenkar. Brilliant beams of contained plasma lanced down from the ships, striking carefully chosen targets. Empty areas in major cities erupted in controlled explosions that lit up the night sky across multiple continents. The message was clear: surrender or face annihilation. "Now we wait for their inevitable capitulation," Zexthor said confidently. "Begin preparing the standard occupation protocols. We'll need to establish garrison points and begin cataloging their resources." But as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. Instead of the panicked surrender transmissions they anticipated, Earth's response was different. "Sir," Yilneth reported with confusion in her voice, "we're receiving transmissions from Earth." "Excellent. Put their surrender on the main display." What appeared instead was a human male in military uniform, standing behind a podium bearing the symbol of the United Nations. His face was grim but determined, and when he spoke, there was no fear in his voice. "To the alien vessels currently in our atmosphere," the human began, "I am Secretary General Martinez of the United Nations. Your unprovoked attack on civilian areas has been noted and recorded. You have exactly 1 hour to withdraw from Earth's solar system, or we will consider it an act of war." The bridge fell silent. Several species exchanged bewildered glances. Did they just threaten us?" Vashka asked in disbelief. Commander Throck's tusks gleamed as he let out a sound that was half laugh, half growl. "These primitives think they can challenge the galactic hegemony? With what weapons? Their crude explosives?" "Perhaps they didn't understand the demonstration," suggested Quindal. "Their primitive minds might not comprehend our technological superiority." Zexthor's crystalline features hardened. "Open a channel to their United Nations. Let's educate them about their situation." The communication array crackled to life, and Zexthor's image was transmitted to Earth. When he spoke, his words were automatically translated into every human language. "Primitives of Earth," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "I am Captain Zexthor of the Galactic Hegemony. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. The demonstration you witnessed was merely a taste of our power. Surrender immediately, and your species will be granted the privilege of serving the hegemony. Resist, and we will reduce your world to ash." The response came within minutes. The same human appeared on screen, but now he was flanked by representatives from various Earth nations. Military officers, political leaders, and civilians stood together in unprecedented unity. "Captain Zexthor," Secretary General Martinez replied, "let me make something clear. Humanity has faced extinction before. Ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, world wars, we've survived them all. We've fought each other for thousands of years, but there's one thing that unites us instantly: a common enemy." He leaned forward, and for the first time, Zexthor noticed something in the human's eyes that gave him pause. It wasn't fear. It wasn't desperation. It was something else entirely. "You want to know what humans do when faced with impossible odds?" Martinez continued. "We don't surrender. We adapt, we overcome, and we fight back with everything we have." Behind Martinez, the assembled humans nodded in agreement. Zexthor saw faces from every continent, every nation, every walk of life. Where he had expected to see terror and submission, he found only determination. "Your hour begins now," Martinez concluded. "Leave our system, or discover what happens when you underestimate humanity." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Dominion's edge in stunned silence. "Surely they're bluffing," Vashka said uncertainly. "What could they possibly do to us with their primitive technology?" But Zexthor was studying the sensor readings more carefully now. Across Earth's surface, he could see massive mobilization efforts beginning. Military bases that had been quiet were suddenly bustling with activity. Industrial facilities were shifting production at unprecedented speed. Most curious of all, the humans' primitive internet was carrying communications between scientists, military leaders, and civilians at a rate that suggested coordinated planning on a global scale. "Sir," Zenkar reported, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from several locations on the surface. Their industrial output has increased by 300% in the last 6 hours. "Impossible," Commander Throck scoffed. "No species can mobilize that quickly." But the evidence was undeniable. Humanity, faced with an existential threat, was transforming before their eyes. Factories that had produced civilian goods were being converted to military production. Research facilities were sharing data at unprecedented rates. Most remarkably, the fractured human governments were cooperating with an efficiency that defied their previous behavior patterns. "Captain," Yilneth reported with growing concern, "I'm receiving thousands of signals from across their planet. They're not trying to hide their communications. It's as if they want us to see their preparations." "What kind of preparations could they possibly make that would threaten us?" Zexthor demanded, though doubt was beginning to creep into his voice. The answer came 12 hours later when the first human vessel launched from Earth. It wasn't much to look at, a crude fusion drive system propelling a relatively small craft. But it was followed by another, and another. And within a day, hundreds of human vessels were emerging from their planet's atmosphere. "Suicide mission," suggested Quindal nervously. But Zexthor was beginning to realize that they might have made a critical error in their assessment. These humans weren't behaving like any primitive species the hegemony had encountered before. Where others had submitted or died in chaotic panic, humanity was organizing, adapting, and preparing for war with a speed and coordination that was frankly unprecedented. "Sir," Zenkar's voice was tight with confusion, "I'm reading massive structural changes to several of their space installations. It appears they're weaponizing their infrastructure." On the main display, images of human space stations showed rapid modifications. Solar panels were being repositioned as focusing arrays. Communication satellites were being fitted with what appeared to be crude but functional weapons systems. Most concerning of all, their primitive space elevator was being converted into what could only be described as an orbital defense platform. "How are they doing this so quickly?" Vashka whispered. The answer came in the form of another transmission from Earth. This time, it wasn't Secretary General Martinez who appeared on screen. It was a collection of humans from various fields: scientists, engineers, military strategists, and civilians. "We know you're watching," one of them said, a woman in a lab coat whose eyes burned with fierce intelligence. "You think we're primitive because our technology isn't as advanced as yours. But you made one critical mistake in your assessment." "What mistake?" Another human continued, this one clearly a military officer. "You assumed that technological superiority equals tactical superiority. You assumed that because we haven't reached the stars, we don't know how to fight." A third human, an elderly man with calloused hands, stepped forward. "But we've been fighting for our survival since our species first drew breath. Every disaster, every war, every impossible challenge, it's made us stronger." The transmission cut to images from across Earth. Factories working around the clock, scientists collaborating across former enemy lines, military forces that had been separate now training together with brutal efficiency, children and elderly civilians working alongside soldiers and engineers. "You want to see what humans do when threatened with extinction?" the woman in the lab coat asked. "We become one. Every individual, every nation, every resource, all focused on a single goal." The final speaker was a young man who couldn't have been more than 20 years old. But when he spoke, his words carried the weight of an entire species. Survival. The transmission ended. And for the first time since arriving in the Sol system, Captain Zexthor felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest: uncertainty. Looking at the sensor readings, watching the impossible transformation taking place on the world below, he began to suspect that the galactic hegemony might have finally encountered a species that would not go quietly into servitude. The hour deadline was approaching, and humanity showed no signs of backing down. If anything, they seemed to be preparing for the kind of fight that would make their previous wars look like minor disagreements. Zexthor straightened in his command chair, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the bridge lights. "All ships prepare for combat operations. It appears these humans need a more forceful demonstration of our capabilities." But even as he gave the order, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to learn something about humanity that their intelligence reports had failed to capture, something that might change everything.